Thank you for choosing to stay with Morning Live. We continue with our broadcast here at the Johannesburg Correctional Centre. Throughout the course of the morning, we talked about rehabilitation, but also that two-day conference that's happening in Pretoria for ex-offenders, and it's all about redress, all about finding the commonality of how we reintegrate ex-offenders back into society. Right now, I'm joined by NICRO, the National Institute for Crime Prevention and Reintegration of Offenders. They lend support to prisoners before and after they are released from prisons, and to the families as well. Right now, NICRO's Hilda Khobeni joins me. Hilda, thank you very much for joining me here on Morning Live. Just talk to me about that support that you give to prisoners before they're released and to the families.
When the prisoners are still in prison, I come and provide life skills to them. And mostly I listen to them because they are the ones who knows their problems. So I listen to them and I get the factors that made them to come to prison. And when they go out, I also go to their families to sit down with them. Because these people are from the communities, they are our brothers, our children. And when they come to prison, they lose an element of trust. And then when they go back to the community, in most cases, they are not accepted.
That acceptance, that role that NICRO plays in facilitating those relationships, what are some of the common issues around the breakdown or the lack of accepting someone that's come out of prison?
It's because people are not aware of the way the courts sentence these people. When a person is sentenced maybe to 15 years, the community expects the person to stay in prison for 15 years. Yet there are acts that are used to sentence them. In most cases, those who are sentenced to 15 years stay only 7.5 years, then they qualify to go out of prison. Then people don't accept that because they think a person must stay there for 15 years, and they think that is injustice to them.
The recurring theme of rehabilitation, the kind of rehabilitation that criminals or prisoners or ex-offenders should be going through, or offenders, there's been a lot said this morning about that, but are we doing enough in terms of rehabilitating those that have been sentenced and find themselves in these correctional centres?
Actually, I don't think we as people can do enough. I think offenders themselves need to find it in themselves that they want to be rehabilitated. Because most offenders stay in prison for a long time, but when they go out, they are still not rehabilitated, and they go back to the offenses that they committed, and they come back to prison again. So it is not actually to us as a community or as organizations to rehabilitate them, but rehabilitation needs to come from within.
But we hear some shocking reports of prisoners being in their cells for up to 23 hours, being released for an hour. Surely that can't be effective rehabilitation.
I'm not going to say much about that because that is for prison. It doesn't affect NICRO in any way. Yes.
Let's talk about the organization NICRO itself. Just over 100 years old. It's gone from strength to strength. It's done lots of work on the ground. Are we seeing the inroads? Do communities, offenders understand that once you've come out of a correctional center, that the actual work begins now?
They do actually, but the thing is, they are going there to be with the communities, with the families. And if those people do not accept them fully, then it brings them back to prison. Because really and truly, if you think of someone who's been in prison for a long time and he goes back home, when they go to work, they don't leave him with bread or food to eat during the day. And remember, the antisocial connection that he had before he went to prison are still waiting there to use the person. And if the person is exposed to hunger or poverty, it is easy for him to join those connections again.
We're in the final day of the ex-offenders conference that's currently underway, or will start at 9 o'clock in Pretoria. From a NICRO sense, how important is this dialogue?
How do we?
How important is it, this dialogue that's underway over the last 2 days between ex-offenders and the victims of crime?
That is very difficult to say, because that is what I do here in the correctional center. Victims seem to be not happy. Victims seem to be not happy with the victim-offender dialogue, because I think most of them are not satisfied with the years that the prisoners stay in prison. And they feel that it's the law that is protecting the offenders and not them. But now I think if the communities can be sensitized more about this sentencing and the offenders coming back to their communities, I think that will help everyone.
I'm going to leave it there, but thank you very much for joining me. That's Hilda Khobeni from NICRO, the National Institute for Crime Prevention and Reintegration of Offenders, and just talking about the work that they do on a daily basis in many correctional centres across the country. You would have heard me say that ex-offenders conference is in day 2. Today is the final day. Once that conference wraps up, suggestions, ideas will be put together and then forwarded to the Minister's Department, and from there we'll have to wait to see whether that will be considered or implemented on any level. But from us here at the Johannesburg Correctional Centre, remember, we no longer use the term prison. It's all about rehabilitation and making sure that there's forgiveness and reintegration back into community. From us, it's a wrap. Cha-cha, let's go back to the studio.